There we go. So, welcome, Alessandro. What I'll do is I'll first, once again, introduce myself and then I'll hand it over to you. So, for anyone who's watched these videos, I hope they don't find this not again. But my name's Cathy Bettman, and currently I'm working as an associate professor, deputy dean of holistic counseling and psychotherapy at the Metavision Institute. But I'd also like to recognize Ken Miller Institute, where I'm a clinical fellow, and of course, PACFA, where we are both on the research committee.
Yeah.
And that's why one of the reasons I'm delighted to be having a conversation with you tonight. So, can you introduce yourself and tell the audience what it is that you actually do?
Sure. Thanks, Kathy. I, I guess I started my career as a secondary school teacher in languages, and then I made the transition into counseling, and I did my grad dip and then my master's in counseling, and now I work as a school counselor, and so that's my primary job. And I also work at ACAP as a sessional educator. And then I'm also studying my PhD at the moment at the University of Notre Dame.
So, wow, that's kind of quite a big leap from teaching. What were you teaching? Italian, because you didn't even say your name.
Oh, sorry, I'm Alessandro. Yeah, Alessandro. Yeah, that's my name. And yeah, I was doing Italian and English as a second language. While I was studying teaching, I knew that I wanted to do something along the lines of counseling, but I wasn't really sure what it was that I actually wanted to study. I didn't know if I wanted to do psychology or social work or counseling. And then I kind of read up on what counseling was about, and I quite liked the approach and the subjects. And so I thought, let me do that. And so then I was doing that at the same time as I was studying my teaching degree. And
Oh,
then,
really? You did both of them
yeah,
together?
I was doing them at the same time, but at separate institutions. And then,
Wow. That
yeah,
was
and
a big
then
load.
but I was doing the counseling quite slowly, to be honest. And just because I was studying as a full-time university student. And so I did kind of one subject a trimester or term, whatever it was back then. And just I wanted to see how it all went. And then I really liked doing counseling. And so I kind of once I'd done a few years of teaching, I found an opportunity to work as a counselor. And, a school took a chance on me. And as you know, not having any experience in counseling or anything like that. And then that's how my career started to grow, like in that space.
But at the same time, I know you say they took a chance, but you had both, or would have eventually had both those qualifications, the
Yeah, so
counseling
at the
side of
time
it
I had
and
my
the
master,
education.
yeah, I had my master's of teaching,
Yeah.
and I also had my grad dip in counseling. And
Wow.
then a few
Yeah.
years into working, I decided to do the masters of counseling and psychotherapy. And I was doing that while I was working.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've had a pretty full-on load for a long time
Yeah,
because
I guess
doing
so.
your PhD now as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been doing, yeah. So what am I? I think I'm in my third year now of the PhD.
Yeah.
I think
Well,
it's the third
you're
year.
rolling ahead, but we'll get there. I mean,
Yeah.
because part of this initiative, and I forgot to even say it in the beginning, but this is an initiative from born out of the research committee of the national heads of counseling and psychotherapy education. And the goal is to encourage research and publication in Australia. And so, I mean, apart from the fact that it's great to be able to introduce a Pact for Research committee meeting, it's also wonderful to track your journey from somewhere that was education, teaching Italian and English as a second language, and coming to a point of doing PhD. And I know you've even had publications along the way. So wow. So talk a little bit about how here you were, you're now in, studying counseling. You found that was the place you wanted to be.
Yeah.
How did you get interested in doing research. And I got to be honest, I do know, but it would be good for you to share the story with others.
Yeah, sure. So what happened was when I was doing my Masters of Counseling and Psychotherapy, my the research project that I completed was kind of what started my re interest in research and like the possibility of getting into research. And and I've said to you, Cathy, that I thank you for giving me that nudge as well, because you being my supervisor throughout that process was really helpful.
Yeah,
And after, we completed the masters, we then published the paper together.
yeah,
And that was pretty much the start of me getting into research. And then also the possibility of doing a PhD. I didn't even know was an option for me at the time.
yeah,
And that was another nudge that you kind of gave me. Then I followed you to Notre Dame, and that was and the, after we submitted that publication, that kind of opened my eyes to what research could offer,
yeah,
because I then was able to present at conferences and distribute my paper to different networks that I was part of. And I was able to, like, I thought that I was making a difference in my own way, in my community, in something that I'm really passionate about,
yeah.
because the paper was on working with adolescents in schools, and that's something that obviously I love. It's just one of my passion areas.
Mm.
And so I was really like happy to be able to make that difference. And that's when I thought, okay, well, maybe doing a PhD, I can build on what I had done and do it on a bigger scale.
Mm. But going back even, so there you were doing your master's. When, before you'd done any research, when
Yeah.
you saw that's what you got to do, that's part of the course requirements, were you kind of like, oh, what have I got to do research for? Because I came here to do counseling, because that's something that we often
Okay.
find in students. Did you have
I,
that kind
to
of,
be honest, no, because I actually enjoyed that unit. Like that was probably one of my favorite units, just because I was finally able to write about something that I wanted to write about. Because I found that, when you study, obviously you're at the mercy of, the course structure and their requirements. And I saw the relevance in doing it, because I was studying something that I wanted to get into, and something that I was really interested in.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I did see it to be relevant for to my career as well as a counselor.
Okay, that's interesting,
Yeah.
because sometimes, we find students, they go, I'm here to do counseling. How's this going to be helpful to me? But then so many, if not most of them, once they've actually done it, and
Yeah.
at the end, how we used to have like a colloquium, a mini colloquium, and we used to have the submission of or encourage a submission of a journal article, or write it up as a report, as a journal article. They then used to go, wow, I could see
Yeah.
it was quite palpable, their enjoyment doing that presentation.
Absolutely.
But you felt right from the word go that this was
So
something that you were interested in
yeah,
trying
and I
out
think
anyway.
I think so. And I also thought like I can actually read up on this properly and then go back to my job and say that I've done something like valuable in the community. And so I felt like I'd learned a lot more about my subject area, which I liked. And so I think that I was quite excited to do the research project.
Okay. And also you were kind of immersed in that context anyway, weren't
Yeah,
you?
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was a living project, wasn't it?
Yeah, so for me, yeah, that was a highlight actually of doing the masters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then again, you were also kind of a little bit different from a lecturer's point of view, because students, once they finish, they were excited about it and they very happy and feel great about themselves, but then they move on, and actually sitting down and tidying up what was their final assignment to the point where it could
Yeah.
be published is like, yeah, I'll do it someday, and then they never do. But
Yeah.
you really got yourself into it, and you really were determined to get it published.
Yeah, no, I don't know where that kind of came from, but I honestly don't know. But I think it was just because I part of me has always wanted to get into research, and I think that having that opportunity was really exciting for me. So then I thought, if I have the opportunity to do this, then why not? And so then I just went with it, and I just, yeah, wanted to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember as being part of that process.
Yeah.
As always, you get the amendments to be made. I think we
Yeah.
had a couple of those, but you got that done. So what did it feel like
Yeah, it's,
when
I mean,
that
look,
was
I
done?
think that like you reach a stage where you just kind of where you know that, I mean, maybe not then, but I think now maybe I've developed a bit more of a mature mentality around it. But I think at the time it was a bit frustrating, like to have so many people like nitpick your work. But I remember you saying actually at the time that I can't remember if it was major or minor revisions that we were recommended, but I remember you saying that that's better than them just rejecting it altogether. So I think that's what kept me going because I thought, okay, as long as I can meet what they've asked, then I'm fine. But I know it is a little bit frustrating, to have to do that. But I understand it, obviously.
Well, it is interesting because when you get those re requests, if you can call it that, for amendments, you think, how the hell can they be criticizing what I've written? It's really important. What is this about? But actually, when one does what they say, it actually does make a much
Of
tighter,
course.
much better article at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I remember even suggestions that you may have made along the way and things like that about because it was a qualitative research that we had done, and I remember you encouraging me to find, some type of numerical data within that, like how many of the people said this and how many blah blah blah. And so I remember like the whole process actually, because it
Yeah.
was kind of a first for me to do something like that.
I kind of also remember that I was at the point in my career where I was so qualitative, like in my perspective. So it's interesting to hear what you're saying there about adding sort of more quantitative statistical stuff,
No, I remember that.
because I was so qualitative in my approach that any question of limitations, used to really get my back up. It was like, this is a qualitative study. It's not about how many people you've got. It's about what they are saying. And so I can remember us working on not calling it limitations, but on taking responsibility for the truthfulness and the
Yeah.
and the the quality. I don't remember the exact words, but I remember that at that point, whereas maybe now I'm a little bit more softened and don't go
Okay.
mad when people say what the limitations are,
Okay.
how we grow. But yeah,
Yeah.
so it was a great achievement when you submitted that, and it finally was published in quite a respectable journal.
Yeah, I was really happy with where it ended up as well. Like I know that was the only one that I came across that I kind of thought at the time, oh, this kind of fits what I want. But
Yeah.
now that I've done more research and that I can see that there'd be other opportunities now as well if I want to publish in the future. Yeah,
Well, isn't that the case? The more we
yeah,
learn, the more we realize how little we know.
yeah.
And the more research we do, the more questions we find that need to be answered. But can you just repeat or give the topic area again?
Of the one that we
The first
published.
one, yeah.
Yeah, so that was it was an investigation into the experiences of school counselors working with adolescents.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, that was it.
And in some ways, and I think the reason I totally encouraged you to go further was because you seemed to enjoy it. Your turnover was fantastic. You kind of, and I think my co-supervisor Madeleine would say the same thing,
Well,
we
thank you.
don't have to motivate you. You're very self-motivating. You're one of those students. And so it wasn't rocket science to be going, I think you should think about doing more in this area. Um, but then how did you get to decide on the next research question and
Yeah.
topic that you wanted to investigate?
So as in terms of my PhD
Yeah,
question.
yeah.
Yeah, so I think that we did when we did that paper, it was for me, it was more like not a political paper, but more a paper just about the role of the counselor in a school. And it was a smaller study. We did, I think I interviewed 7 participants, and then I've always working in schools and seeing kind of what goes on day to day, I've always wanted to look into what counselors like have to say about students who like experience difficulties when they're at school. Because I noticed that because I did this other graduate certificate in well-being in education, and a lot of the perspectives out there were just from the teachers. And while I think that that's valid, me being a counselor, I wanted to see more what they experience, and I know that yeah, and so I think I just saw it as a development of what I had done, because I kind of looked at the role of the counselor and what they can do in schools, and then I kind of wanted to look at as well how on a larger scale what they think the issues are and how they can be addressed, but from the counselor's point of view, because I also like am very passionate about increasing the voice of the counselor in general, but also in schools.
But you
And
were also, from my perspective, really concerned, curious, for want of a better word, about a particular cohort of
yeah,
students who you kind of felt were being marginalized, overlooked, not,
so
yeah,
yeah.
go for it.
Yeah, so it was more, yeah, sorry to interrupt, but it's more about those students who perhaps are misunderstood, or those students, and I've labeled them, who experience social, emotional, and behavioral difficulties. So it might be those with those who exhibit like externalized behaviors in class. They might be the really, let's say, in inverted commas, naughty child in the school who is very outward in their approach, and they might be met with discipline or might be met with a certain type of punishment.
Mm,
And perhaps my question is always, is there something that's being missed? Are we meeting the needs of that student?
mm,
Um, in and what harm might we be doing in approaching a student that way? But
mm.
then also on the other side, there are those students who, withdraw quite a lot and might be missed in a school setting because of the busyness and because the attention tends to fall on the student that stands out a lot more.
Mm,
And that could be in a negative or a positive way.
mm.
And so I just kind of wanted to capture what counselors are witnessing that goes on in a school for both types of students.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
And so again, it's a qualitative study, and again, the methodology is semi-structured interviews.
yes, yes. So
Okay.
I've completed my 30 interviews.
And
Um,
who did you interview?
Yeah, so I mean that was really good because I was able to interview a huge range of different of counselors with different training backgrounds, and also counselors in different school systems and in different geographical
Oh,
locations.
wow. Mm,
So I'm really happy with the demographic I was able to capture, because I was able to get some people from rural settings. I was able to get metropolitan, regional. I was able to get people from counseling background, psychology, social work. And so there is a bit of a mix in there, which I like because I kind of value, I think we all have as in we all have like an important role to play in the treatment of young people.
yeah. So
Yeah.
here's me, I said before, don't talk to me about limitations, but a question that I think people would be interested in was, I hear about the diversity part being really good, but was it too diverse to draw any similarities, or did you find that actually you have been able to draw conclusions
No,
even
I
out of
think
the
there've been
different?
lots of similarities, lots, like lots. The similar, I guess the differences would be if it's low socioeconomic or high socioeconomic, they might bring different responses from the counselors. But in a general sense, even then, I did find that there's quite a bit of an overlap.
Wow.
Yeah. Um,
Well, and so where are you up to?
So where I'm up to is I'm currently working on my results section. So I've come up with a draft of my themes and codes as part of the thematic analysis. And so I'm just working through the content now and understanding, what people actually said. And I'm trying to put it onto paper. And it's very interesting. I find it interesting, some of the results that have come of this, like effects from after COVID, and just a general outlook on the status quo of what's going on in schools. Um, there's been a lot of information I've been able to gather.
Yeah, yeah. Was there anything? I'm a bit wary to ask you about your results and just push back if you don't want to,
Oh, it's
because
okay.
it's yours and you haven't disseminated it yet. But can you just give us one little result possibly that you were surprised at
I was surprised.
or interested or anything that just one little tidbit that you can share?
Um, so I mean, there are probably lots of things, but something that I'm just thinking now about what that could be. Um, One thing that I found interesting that I don't think is surprising, but I don't know if there's a lot of research in this at the moment is the COVID effect. So one of the things that I was able to find was that a lot of counselors mentioned that those years had an impact on a particular cohort of students in terms of delaying their social and emotional development. So, and they mentioned that they are witnessing behaviors that they never witnessed before, and that school absenteeism is increasing. And a lot of counselors did seem to think that this correlates with like a post-COVID impact. And that was from, counselors who'd been, and some of them who'd been in the profession for a really long time, like 20 years plus, 30 years plus, have noticed a different trend. And
Wow.
that's one of the things that stands out. But I mean, there are a lot of other things too, but I don't know, that just came to
So we got
mind.
to watch the space.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So in terms of the process, like, how's that been? Were there times where you thought, why the hell am I doing this? Or has it been, smooth sailing? For those watching, what would you tell them?
Look, I wouldn't say smooth sailing. I know that I question sometimes my ability and my all of that, my capability of being able to actually do a PhD and complete it and pass. And like there've been times where it was very stressful. But at the same time, it's kind of that you're doing it for a reason, and so you do it anyway. So I guess that's kind of my mentality.
Yeah,
I know that when it came to like ethical considerations and all
yeah.
of that, I remember the ethics was probably the more stressful part of the whole process for me personally.
Going through ethics committee.
Yeah, that was quite challenging for me. But I mean, I have really good support. But at the same time, I did feel a bit stressed about it because I didn't know how it would go,
Yeah,
and also the idea of them questioning who I wanted to include in my study. I also didn't like that.
yeah,
But I understand that that's their job, and but I had one thing I wanted to focus on. I wanted to be a homogenous type of group, and I wanted to just interview school counselors, and that's it. Whereas there were questions about even the participants that I wanted to include. And I remember that part I didn't like, but I had to kind of defend my position. And I'm glad that I did that.
yeah,
And with your help and, everyone else's help. And so, yeah, I think it's just remembering that you can, if you like have a bit of a passion project and you know that that's what you want, you just have to be able to defend it.
yeah.
in a
It's a
way that
lengthy
in a way that's
process
like
in a way.
that's in a way that's formal and
Yeah.
research backed, and you have to have your clear goal in mind and all of that. And I think I tried to have that as much as I could
Yeah.
along. Yeah. And I think that helped me say, no, I just want school counselors. Then,
Yeah. But once that was over, and that is always the, to me, yucky part of having,
yeah.
to dot all those I's and cross all the T's. But once that was done, you love doing the interviews, I think.
Oh yeah, that was great. Yeah, yeah, and I really enjoyed it. It's good to people like really like the opportunity to be able to sit there and talk about their profession and give back, and so I got a sense that even the participants enjoyed being part of that experience, and
Yeah.
that was nice too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So now you've done all your transcribing,
Yeah.
coding, analyzing, and now you're writing up your results.
Yes.
You've done a thematic analysis, and now you're writing up the
Now I'm
results.
writing the results. I've done a rough draft of the first entire theme, and
Yeah.
now I'm working on my second one.
Wow.
So
Okay.
yeah, that's where I'm up to. Yeah.
In
Lots of
between
transcripts.
teaching, not only at school, but teaching counseling and doing all that as well.
Yeah, it's hard, but you kind of have to like what I try to do, and to be honest, it doesn't happen every day, but my goal is to, be able to sit down most afternoons and do about 1 or 2 hours of
Okay.
work after work. Like to do study after coming home from my job. And
Now,
that's
anyone watching this will understand why you
yeah.
were encouraged to
Yeah.
do a PhD.
Well, that's what I try to do. It doesn't always happen, but I try my best. And obviously some weeks you get busy and all of that, but I try to stay on top of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So disseminating it, you've already put your hand up and presented at some conferences, and how's
Yeah,
that
so
gone?
I did that for the first paper that I published. And for this one, I think I did present at PACFA when I was first, I think it was maybe last year or the year before. And I enjoyed doing that because I was able to, it helped me to like narrow down to focus my research a little bit more, to understand it more. And I was able to tell people kind of what I was doing and what my hopes are from that. And I remember also the 3MT that I did helped me in that as well, because
Yeah.
I really had to be very clear about like every word I said was important. And so in a very short amount of time.
Yeah.
So I remember
Yeah.
that process helped me a lot too.
Yeah. I think you presented at Notre Dame as well, if I remember. Didn't
Oh,
you?
perhaps,
I think.
perhaps. Yeah, I
Anyway,
don't.
but you've been quite proactive and continue to want to be doing more in terms of publishing
Yeah.
and presenting.
And
So
I think that for people that, sorry to interrupt you, people
no,
who
you're
want
not.
to do presentations or want to get out there and like do things in the field, because I think these days, if you open LinkedIn, there are so many people that put themselves out there in terms of speaking at conferences and doing things, and I think that I like that to be part of my role, but not the only thing I do. But I think that having research helps you to get in if you want to present, like if you want to be part of those events and talk to people about your area of expertise or area of passion. Like if you have a paper behind you that you publish or research, it gives you also a bit more credibility,
Yeah,
and then you're more likely to be accepted to present at these events.
yeah.
So I think for people that want to do that, publishing can help them to get there.
But I think what I'm hearing from you is that you also think it's important to be doing something, a topic or an area that you're really interested in and that you
Yeah,
really love because you actually doing it for some length of time. It's not like a few months event.
Well, yeah, I think it's, and that's what I try to tell I'm not a PhD supervisor, obviously, because I don't have a PhD myself,
That'll
but I
come.
tell my students that they who ask me about it since I'm doing my PhD, I say, look, if you have something that you're really passionate about and you see that there might be a gap in the literature somewhere out there, why not fill it doing a PhD? And if you see yourself using it in your profession or using it even in further research, um, it's probably a good way to go about it rather than doing something maybe purely for the sake of it.
Mm, mm.
Yeah.
But you've also mentioned you're not a PhD supervisor yet, because
I didn't say yet, but I just said I'm
no,
not.
I put the yet in because I can remember my supervisor, Professor Carolyn Noble. She said, you know, your thesis is very important, but there's something that goes with doing a PhD, and that is that you have a responsibility now to
Oh,
be showing other people the process of doing a PhD. So it's like we're handing the baton on to the next
okay.
crowd. And so, yes, that's the next step.
My goodness.
But before that, I imagine, have you got thoughts of when you've completed this, which is going to happen, no matter what you said you sometimes doubt it, it is going to happen. So do you have thoughts on its dissemination? Are you keen to get that happening?
Oh, on its dissemination, as in
Yeah,
my, yeah,
the results.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to. I really would like to like bring it to life, and I want it to kind of see the light of day, so that I don't know how that would look yet, whether it's after completing my PhD I start to look into more publications, or if it's me simply, presenting my findings at conferences and contributing in that way.
Hmm.
I'm not too sure how that might look yet, but
Maybe
I do.
even a book.
Perhaps even a book. Yeah, I
Hmm.
didn't think about a book, but yeah, a book's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so yeah, things like that. I would be very open to doing, like to taking it somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I could go on talking about that, but it brings us also, though, to a point where you're now on the research committee at PACVA, and
yeah.
I might be throwing you into throwing you into it here, but like, what was your interest in doing that, and what are your ideas of contributing, if you have any?
Well, it was really I want to be part of these. I like to be part of these conversations and to know what's happening in a profession that, I'm very passionate about. And I think that it kind of aligns well with kind of what I'm doing at the moment. I'm doing my PhD. I'm doing sessional work as an educator. And I think being part of the research committee is another way for me to be able to give back. And it kind of aligns with what I'm doing. And so it helps me personally, but it also allows me to contribute to, the research in the field. And I want there to be more research in the field of counseling. So I want to be part of it.
Mm.
And I don't really know what personally I can bring to the committee or what that would be, but I think sometimes I um I like to think things through well. So what I found myself doing is after meetings that we had, going away and thinking about things, and then being able to provide some, like after the meeting we had recently, I've been thinking about what I can offer. And
Yeah,
then so I'd like to be able to like contribute to that group
yeah,
that can maybe make a difference in the field of research
yeah,
in counseling specifically.
yeah. So, I mean, what's so clear is your energy and your passion, and I think those are huge contributions. I'm just mindful of the time because I could go on talking forever with you, but have I left out anything? Is there anything that you feel you'd like to add to the conversation about the importance of research, the doing of research, the publication of research?
Look, I think it's more that, look, the only thing I would add is that um, if there are people watching that are interested in doing research, is to not be afraid of it, because I think it can seem very overwhelming, and I think people feel like they need to be elite academics to do a PhD, but I don't necessarily think that's the case because I don't see myself to be one of those people. I've always had to kind of work quite hard to get results and to get, and so I think that if you have, good supervision and you've got a topic that you really like, then you can do it. And so I think that that's what I would say if there are people watching who might want to do research.
Well, that's wonderful. So, look, all I can say is thank you, thank you, thank you for
Thank you
taking this
too.
time with all the things you are doing, and lots of luck, and see you soon.
Yeah, see you soon. Thank you so much, Cathy.